Picture this. You're standing under the Mesopotamian sun thousands of years ago. It's a normal day in the sprawling city of Babylon. The air is thick with the smell of spices from the market, the distant sound of construction, and the murmur of countless conversations in Akkadian. Suddenly, a shadow begins to creep across the sun. The sky, once a brilliant blue, starts to dim. The birds fall silent. A strange twilight gloom descends upon the city. People stop what they're doing, their faces turning upwards, a mixture of awe and terror in their eyes. The sun, the source of all life and power, is being devoured by an unseen monster. Is it the end of the world? A sign of divine anger? This is what it was like to witness a total solar eclipse in ancient Babylon. Today, we see an eclipse and we think science, astronomy, and maybe we even book a trip to see it. But for the ancient Babylonians, it was a terrifying cosmic event, a message from the gods that could spell disaster for the king and the entire empire. Yet, amidst this widespread fear, a small group of people were looking at the same event, not with terror, but with intense curiosity. They were the astronomer priests, the scientists of their day. They weren't just watching the sky. They were meticulously recording it, trying to understand it, and even predict it. This is the story of how, in the heart of an empire ruled by superstition, the seeds of modern astronomy were sown, pitting rational observation against primal fear in a battle for the very understanding of the cosmos. To understand the Babylonian mindset, you have to understand their worldview. For them, the heavens were a divine celestial tablet. The movements of the sun, moon, and planets were not random. They were omens, messages written by the gods to guide or warn humanity. The king was the central figure in this cosmic drama. He was the link between the gods and the people. So, any bad omen in the sky, especially one as dramatic as a solar eclipse, was seen as a direct threat to the king's life and, by extension, the stability of the entire kingdom. Imagine being a Babylonian citizen. The priests tell you that if the sun disappears during the day, it means the great sky god Marduk is furious. It could mean famine, invasion, or the death of your ruler. The panic would be immense. People would flock to the temples, making offerings, praying for mercy. The entire society would grind to a halt, paralyzed by a celestial shadow. The eclipse wasn't just a fascinating natural phenomenon, it was a crisis. But inside the towering ziggurats, a different kind of activity was taking place. Here, the astronomer priests, known as the Tupsaru, were hard at work. These weren't just mystics. They were scholars, mathematicians, and dedicated observers. For centuries, they had been keeping detailed records of celestial events on clay tablets. Night after night, they would climb to their observatories, armed with basic instruments like water clocks and gnomons to chart the course of the stars. They recorded the rising and setting of Venus, the path of the moon, and the appearance of comets. They weren't just looking, they were collecting data. Their goal was initially driven by divination. If they could understand the patterns of the heavens, they could predict the will of the gods. But in the process of creating this vast astrological library, something incredible happened. They started to see mathematical patterns. They noticed that celestial events weren't random at all. They occurred in cycles. This was a revolutionary shift in thinking. The universe might not be the result of whimsical gods, but a complex, predictable machine. The ultimate test of their newfound knowledge was the solar eclipse. An eclipse is one of the most mathematically precise events in the solar system. It happens when the moon passes directly between the sun and Earth, casting a shadow on our planet. For an eclipse to be total, everything has to align perfectly: the distances, the angles, the timing. To predict such an event without modern computers seems almost impossible, but the Babylonians managed to do it. How? Through the discovery of something called the Saros cycle. By poring over their centuries of records, they noticed that similar eclipses, both solar and lunar, seemed to recur in a predictable pattern. They calculated that this cycle lasted approximately 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. This was the Saros cycle. It wasn't a perfect predictor for any single location, because that 8-hour difference means the Earth has rotated a third of the way around. So the eclipse would be visible from a different part of the world. But it gave them a powerful tool. They could now say with some certainty when an eclipse was likely to happen. This was a game changer. It transformed them from passive observers of divine wrath to active participants who could anticipate the future. This knowledge gave them immense power. Now, when they knew an eclipse was coming, they could prepare for it. But how do you prepare for an event that you believe will kill your king? This is where things get really fascinating and a little bizarre. The Babylonians developed an ingenious and rather dramatic ritual, the substitute king ritual. When the astronomers predicted a dangerous eclipse, they wouldn't try to stop it. How could they? Instead, they would try to trick the gods. A few weeks before the eclipse, the real king would go into hiding. A substitute, often a prisoner or a commoner, would be chosen to take his place. This person would be dressed in royal robes, live in the palace, and be treated as the king. He was the Zarfi. His job was simple: to absorb the divine anger meant for the real king. When the day of the eclipse arrived and the sky went dark, the kingdom believed the gods were striking down the king on the throne. Once the eclipse was over and the danger had passed, the substitute king's reign would come to an end, often permanently. The real king would then emerge from hiding, safe and sound, having successfully cheated fate. The kingdom was saved. Think about the sheer audacity of this plan. It's a fascinating blend of science and superstition. They used advanced mathematical prediction, a product of rational thought, to know when the celestial threat was coming. But their solution to that threat was pure ritual, an attempt to fool the very gods they were studying. It shows a society in transition, caught between an old world of magic and a new world of science. They had the knowledge to predict the eclipse, but not yet the understanding to see it as a natural event devoid of divine malice. One of the most famous examples of this comes from a series of clay tablets from the 7th century BC, during the reign of King Esarhaddon of Assyria, who had inherited much of the Babylonian culture and knowledge. These tablets contain astronomical reports warning the king of upcoming eclipses and advising the substitute king ritual. We have letters from the chief scholar to the king saying, "The eclipse is coming. Let the Lord my king be at ease. We will perform the ritual." It's a direct window into this incredible moment in history. The predictions weren't always perfect. Sometimes they'd predict an eclipse that didn't happen over Babylon, or one would occur that they missed. But their successes were frequent enough to solidify their authority. They were the keepers of cosmic secrets, the only ones who could navigate the treacherous relationship between heaven and earth. This Babylonian achievement cannot be overstated. Their meticulous records and their discovery of cycles like the Saros were the foundation upon which later astronomy was built. When Alexander the Great conquered Babylon in the 4th century BC, the Greeks were astonished by the centuries of astronomical data they found. Greek astronomers like Hipparchus and later Ptolemy heavily relied on this Babylonian data to develop their own, more sophisticated models of the cosmos. In a very real sense, the journey to the moon began not in the 20th century, but thousands of years ago on a clay tablet in Babylon. The Babylonian astronomers were walking a tightrope. They lived in a world steeped in superstition, yet they were practicing a form of science. They used observation and mathematics to bring order to what seemed like chaos. They didn't completely banish fear. Their own substitute king ritual proves that, but they replaced blind terror with calculated risk. They showed that the universe, while awesome and powerful, was not entirely random. It had rules, and if you were clever enough and watched carefully enough, you could begin to understand them. So, the next time you see an eclipse, remember the ancient Babylonians. Remember the crowds looking up in fear, and the lone astronomer priests in their ziggurats looking up with their styluses and clay tablets, trying to decipher the secrets of the sky. They were the first to realize that the darkness was not an end, but a shadow, a predictable, understandable, and ultimately a survivable shadow. They took humanity's first brave step out of the darkness of cosmic fear and into the light of scientific understanding. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. It's amazing to think how far we've come in our understanding of the universe, all thanks to these ancient pioneers. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the history of science. Let me know in the comments what ancient mystery you'd like to explore next. Thanks for watching.